If music is the food of love, let us feast. Yo, what's going on, people? This is Akala, and this week's classic album. Is this the most famous album cover of all time? I would hope that a great number of you watching this would know what album this is just from the cover. But if you don't, never mind. I feel sorry for you, but it's alright. This is Pink Floyd's classic album, The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, I'm going to commit sacrilege and say this might not actually be my favourite Pink Floyd album. I certainly like The Wall. If not just as much, I've listened to this a lot more than The Wall, to be fair. So maybe I've just battered it so much. But I chose to do this one first. We might look at The Wall later. But this is just incredible, conceptual, musical album with everything you really need from an album. It had the big radio songs like Money, but it had things like Great Gig in the Sky. And just really was an album that feels like it's not of this world. Like you listen to it, and I'm sure it was intentional, but maybe it wasn't. The album has a certain sound that to me is otherworldly, that is out of space, that is sci-fi, that is not of this planet. So the songs reinforce this idea of being on the dark side of the moon or contemplating what it is to be off of Earth. It feels like a sci-fi album to me, an album for a sci-fi film that was never made. So yeah, incredible album, incredible musicians, incredible band with a huge legacy. There is one interesting point to make about Pink Floyd in particular and rock music in general. Interestingly, a lot of people don't know that Pink Floyd were named after two blues singers, Pink Anderson and Floyd Council, which you should look up. And the reason why most people don't know that is for the same reason that generations of young people, including sadly even young black people, have been brought up to believe African Americans, black people in general, had absolutely nothing to do with the development of rock music, when of course Pink Floyd, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, all of those early rock bands were massively influenced by black American music, which wholly shaped what they would do. In fact, a lot of them started just literally covering those songs. Led Zeppelin in particular actually thieved a whole bunch of songs, sadly. Even reggae music was massively inspired by African American blues and soul. A lot of the great reggae bands began covering that music too. But it's really interesting because it's the way in which no one wants to be honest about it, but rock music has become politicized and racialized to the point even young black people often look at rock music as quote unquote white people's music, which is really quite sad because that's not the whole story of the music. And to claim you love a genre but start its history, always when you watch these rock documentaries on TV, they start saying you'll be lucky Jimi Hendrix might get included. You know, if you're really lucky you might get Muddy Waters. But in general the history tends to start the moment white people started playing rock music, which is really quite sad because it's not the truth, it's not the whole story, and it's right there in Pink Floyd's name, you know, some of the origins of this music. None of that takes away from the talent of the Pink Floyds and the Led Zeppelins and the Beatleses of this world, but they were inspired by the music of a people who were not yet legally human in the country that they lived in. So it's easy for a lot of people to look at rock music and say, oh Carla, why are you getting so political about it? But it's really interesting and really important to look at the legacies and the realities for all of those early African American musicians that would shape rock music, including women, people like Memphis Minnie and Rosetta Tharpe, who were early pioneers of blues solo guitar playing, who, because of sexism and racism, are often not remembered. It's important to look at where did Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all those guys end up, and where did all their inspirations end up. That's not saying none of those musicians were successful, many of them were, but it's just very interesting. And we can see similar patterns with hip-hop, with grime, with other forms of music, where the moment the shade of the people making the music changes, all of a sudden it's mainstream, all of a sudden it's intelligent. You know that era when people used to say, you know, I don't like rap, but I like Eminem. Eminem's really good, you know, but Eminem was very clear that all of his inspirations were a bunch of black dudes from the States, which is fine. Like I said, none of that takes away from the talent of the individual artists, but I do think I can't review these kind of albums without thinking about the politics of why most people don't know the origins of the name Pink Floyd. Anyway, that's my waffle aside. Nonetheless, incredible album you should all listen to. Great conceptual, mind-bending, time-traveling, astral music. This week's classic album is The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Big up. If music is the food of love, let us feast.